Hello, and welcome to today's web seminar, Harness the Power of AI to Optimize Testing Processes, sponsored by InfoStretch and featuring speakers Diego Laguidice from Forrester Research, Sunil Pillai from InfoStretch, and Wayne Ariola from Tricentis. I'm your moderator today, Beth Romanek. Thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to our speakers for their discussion panel, let me explain this console you see in front of you. The three panels can all be moved around and resized. At the bottom of your console, you'll also see a widget toolbar. By clicking that Handouts widget in the middle, you can download some resources from InfoStretch. If you have any technical problems, please let us know by typing in the Questions and Answers window to the left. This is also how you can ask questions. There will be a Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. And finally, to optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary applications. This event is being recorded and will be made available later to watch on demand. Once the recording is ready, I'll send you an email with instructions about how you can watch it. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Avery Lyford, who is Chief Customer Officer at InfoStretch, and he'll be moderating today's discussion. Thanks, Avery.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Really exciting program here in terms of AI and how it can impact testing in enterprise. Let me start out with Diego. You've spent a lot of time studying all of this. How do you even define AI? People have talked about it for years. People have been disappointed for years. People are really excited now and seeing an impact. What changed, and how do you differentiate, machine learning from deep learning and some of the other categories that people may have heard?
Well, thanks. First of all, good afternoon and good morning to everyone around the world, and thanks InfoStretch for having me on this interesting panel. It's a great question. We could stay here hours defining what AI is, what it's not. But I would say that the way we define it in Forrester is on one side you can look at this pure view of AI, right? Some people call it general AI or the pure AI. For which a benchmark could be, in that case, AI is the technology that really strives to mimic human intelligence. But that's not really what we're going to be talking about today, because I think we're pretty far from that, or in the way we can mimic human intelligence, especially when you look at creativity and how fast we learn and all the inferences we can make. So we talk more about what we call pragmatic AI, and it's narrower in scope. But often, even narrow AI can exceed our, human intelligence. Think about how fast you can get some results from a whole huge amount of information that have some very intrinsic correlations that we don't see. That's, of course, if we're talking about data. But anyway, so basically, if you look at AI, so AI is basically, a new way of, or a different way of building systems that learn, that are capable of learning and capable of dealing with situations that are not necessarily what they were built for. So they deal with the unexpected as well, right? Which is very different from software programming, which most of testers and developers know today, which is we tell exactly the algorithm what to do. We know the recipe and everything. And so AI is about these systems are able to learn by themselves, a little bit like a child of 4 or 5 years does by looking and watching the first 4 years of his life, watching stuff, hearing stuff. It learns and it starts distinguishing things and matching things up. AI, that's kind of the recent way AI has been, is now taking more and more an important role. And the technology that is most popular in AI is machine learning, right? You mentioned machine learning and deep learning. Well, machine learning is the most popular, I guess, AI technology. I know there's a lot of debate about, is machine learning AI or not, but usually machine learning is classified as a subcategory of AI, one of the important AI technologies. And so machine learning has been around for quite some time, right? It's nothing new. It's used by data scientists to train probabilistic and predictive models. It's getting better and better and better. But where it's getting better is in the deep learning, which is a subfield of machine learning, right? This probabilistic approach of predictive models. Deep learning where deep learning is a special case of machine learning, and it's based on the concepts of neural networks, which superficially, recall the architecture of the brain, and but it has little to do actually with how the brain really works, assuming we knew. But in deep learning, contrary to machine learning, these models learn hierarchical and abstract concepts in a layer by layer, and have more layers than a machine learning algorithm would. So for example, in image recognition, machine learning, a deep learning classification model will start learning the simple ranges of like the form of the face, and then an input layer, later layer might just start focusing and understand the edges around what's, the nose, recognize nose and eyes and eyebrows and mouth, and another layer might put these things into relation and look at the colors. And so as you go deeper into this, classification, into this model, basically the level of abstraction keeps, we keep representing more and more. And so that the layers higher in the hierarchy can basically abstract more and more, and that's a powerful representation by building on all these representations, right? That's what deep learning does. So, if you will, another example is sort of like, letters form words, words form sentences, and so on. This representational power is what makes deep learning special. Deep learning is also more automated than machine learning. Machine learning data scientists are used to build, to engineer the features, the so-called of the model. And in deep learning, that's kind of all automated. So it's more of an automated approach, which brings a little bit of that, of understanding that people, or definitions that people call deep learning, a little bit more of an opaque approach, because it does things on its own. So basically what these these algorithms do is, as they are traversed by data, they learn about that data, and they're capable of recognizing, new data, new situations, new contexts, new data as it becomes available. So machine learning is the parent field of deep learning, and in machine learning, you've got these in deep learning, you've got neural networks, but we've got also decision trees, random forests, support vector machines, which are traditional machine learning statistical algorithms, as I was talking about. The reason why these are important is because, for example, deep learning, we're seeing insurance companies using it for automatically assessing damages and costs, because deep learning does a really good, is much more precise than machine learning in recognizing images. But machine learning is used for personalizing customer experiences by learning individual characteristics, our behaviors, what we want, what we like, and anticipating those. Reducing or augmenting customer service, providing proactive service and self-service to customers. So the way we should really looking at AI is humans, but the fact that AI can augment human beings, right? There's a partnership between these two things, and not a replacement or a conflict. So we should look at AI as being augmenting individuals to do things better, to do things faster, to do things in a more secure way, perhaps in a safer way, because of the precision that these, the technology can bring us.
Diego, thank you. I mean, what strikes me is that for chess playing, it's not a computer that's best, or an AI or a person that's best. It's the combination. AI working with a person, and is the best chess player right now. Mm-hmm. So Neil, one of the interesting things is the application of all this for software and application delivery. What are your thoughts about how AI could make a difference in that field?
Sure, Avery. So really, if you look at AI, so AI is really applicable to areas where there is a lot of data. There are obviously productivity gains to be had, and those are good applications for AI. So if you really think about software delivery, there are different aspects of software delivery, and AI is kind of making inroads, already made inroads in certain different aspects. If you look at some of the upstream processes, for example, developer productivity, right? So you have code reviews that happen today, and AI, there are already tools like AI reviews, etc., which really help automatically code review and make it, make sure they catch errors before they get into into your DevOps cycle. So that's where AI is coming into play. Another upstream cycle that we've seen is pair programming. So there are companies like Codota, etc., which kind of help you, which helps you write code based on millions of other pieces of code that have been written. So it really crowdsources a lot of the code and automatically creates code for you that can really enhance your productivity as a developer. Now, as you go downstream, obviously AI does have a lot of applications around the test automation space. And the reason being, there are a lot of decision points to be done there in terms of infrastructure decisions, resource allocation decisions, and there's a lot of data to make those decisions on. And so AI squarely fits in there to really help optimize those processes. So we do see AI helping with the test automation processes all the way from, could be test case optimization to infrastructure optimization and anything in between. And if you look at the entire DevOps cycle itself, right? So in the DevOps cycle, you have a lot of different data being produced through logs. So different tools produce different pieces of data. And AI definitely has a lot of role to play here because it helps correlate log data coming from different sources and really kind of glean information and patterns which would not really be obvious to typical analytic tools, right? So how do you really look at data coming from your infrastructure and compare it with your logs, which are coming from initial unit test, and figure out, what kind of infrastructure optimization you need to do? You can apply a machine learning model to kind of do that. So those are a few areas where I see AI really helping the software application delivery process. And as Diego mentioned earlier, it is not going to replace a lot of the programmers and the experts that we need to make it happen. It is definitely going to augment and aid these experts to make sure it runs in a much more streamlined fashion.
And Wayne, you've been involved with the world of, testing for a long time and have a lot of experience, and you've kind of seen different technologies come and go. What started to make AI more relevant now, more than it has been in the past?
I'm trying to hide that fact that I'm so old. Okay, thanks, Avery.
No
Anyway,
experience when you were very young.
Thank you. First of all, InfoStretch, thanks for putting this on. This is, I think it's just a very, very hot topic right now, and I think getting down to the basis of the conversation is critical at this point in time. So, to your question, though, I think really where we're at today is the hype associated with any technology is awesome because it allows us to really be and promote a series of real creative thoughts that allows us to get better. And that's what I'm most excited about. Whether you call it AI, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, any kind of applied technology along the way, what we're doing is actually as an organization or as an industry is getting better. And it's critical today. So if you really look at where software testing is in a maturity cycle today, there's a long way to go. A lot of our activities are still primarily manual, and or the current tests
that we have today somewhat produce a pass-fail or binary decision. I hope you guys don't hear the same echo that I hear.
But what's going on today gives us the ability to also start improving upon that. So what I think is going to happen over the next really 18 months is we're going to see a lot of incremental improvements associated with how we're handling the data exhaust associated with the testing activity. And whether that's machine learning or whether that's AI or whether that's pattern matching, I think what's going to ultimately happen is we're going to be able to improve the efficiency and the feedback of the activity of testing, number one, and try to incrementally improve, and I'm going to steal this from you, Diego, our quality at speed, right?
That's true. I mean, I think it's an interesting challenge. And actually, I'll throw a kind of to all of you. What are some of the challenges you all are seeing as a lot of companies are trying to do digital transformations, and what are the challenges you're seeing as people, the enterprise software testing challenges you're seeing as people are working to make that shift? And any of you want to take that? Maybe start, Diego, since I know you're coming to us from Italy.
So yeah, I guess digital is transforming the way we test, right? And it's funny how the link between digital and testing is very strong, but it goes it goes through the following, reasoning. Basically, what is it that makes a business digital? How can companies become more digital? Well, it's basically building better software, right? It's all about software. You have to be successful at building software, which will implement services, products, whatever it is that, that you're, as a company, that you're doing. And this is true across all the industries, from finance to insurance to oil and gas and engineering. Software is eating the world, as someone else said. This is not my it's definitely not my my invention, I would say. And therefore that means that everybody has to become excellent at developing and testing, right? It's just becomes a primary business process of any organization to be able to build great software and deliver it and test it and have it high quality faster. Now, whether they do that in sourced, outsourced, co-sourced, with AI, not with AI, that's another conversation. Agile and DevOps, but all these are actually enablers to make that happen. And so that's kind of the connect, right, between digital and testing. And the requirements on testing, with all these enabling, building software faster with Agile, using DevOps and automating more, just puts all that pressure, which turns into big challenges for testing, which is, as Wayne said, well, the first issue is we still do a lot of manual testing. How do we get rid of that? How do we automate more? Well, I think that we've been working on automation for years. We're getting better at it, but still we're no way close where we need to be. And AI probably can help that, make that better. And we can talk about some case studies later, but actually we already mentioned a few. So the challenges for challenging for testers is being part of that fast speed process that organizations are trying to adopt, and not becoming the bottlenecks, as we used to be, not being the afterthought, step, testing being the afterthought step during development. But it also means doing things smarter. It's not just about speed, right? I mean, we can automate everything. Assume we become really good at automation. It has a cost. And so the other key aspect and challenge is, how can organizations automate smarter and test smarter, so that they have to automate less, perhaps, but cover maybe risk better, business risk. So that requires a bit more intelligent testing, right? It's right-sizing the test strategy, that we call it. How can we use all the data that we have to understand how we can best organize our test strategy around the type of business applications that we need to build? Apps are disappearing. They're becoming more digital experiences, which is basically largely smaller, fine granular pieces of code or microservices that need to be orchestrated and events, which is a complete different way of building applications. And that's a challenge for testing again. How do we test in that type of environment? We're used to test these large siloed apps. Well, what about these small, fine granular distributed architectures? Skills, the lack of skills is another big issue. Testing is becoming also more technical as a job. Dev testers, we see these full stack developers. How do we augment and support testers? But also there's much more harder and sophisticated applications that we're starting to see with IoT, digital experiences, with AI itself. How are we going to test AI systems, right? Right now we're talking about using AI for improving the way we test existing software. That was one of my key researches that I did on AI, which was, how do we use AI to improve what we do today, what we are used to do today at apps? And the other question is, well, applications, actually clients are starting to introduce AI in their organizations. 55% of the organizations are either improving what they did last year with AI, expanding it 10% in that 55. And so AI itself is being adopted as AI and machine learning. I'm not going to distinguish between the two, given that we gave the definition at the beginning. But how, are we going to, what are testers going to do? The existing testers, are they the existing testers, or is there someone else that's going to take the job of testing AI systems? So the whole range of challenges I see, challenges are just going to be increasing.
Could I jump on something there, Avery?
Sure.
So, Diego, you mentioned one thing, and I think it's the first critical component of it, which is this idea of the process cadence mismatch that's currently happening between development and testing. Today, it's really what's killing things, because still, if you look at testing and what's really being executed today, we see really a series of fairly siloed activities, still broken up by the capability of the primary contributor. So the developer really does what they're doing best, and what they're doing best is when they're looking at the particular element of the code. I hope they're using static analysis, but we can argue about that later. But they're constructing their unit tests, maybe using a broader, more collaborative method, maybe TDD, BDD, one of the DDs out there, and assisting to close the gap. But today, there's still a series of siloed activities. And then as you start to branch out and you start looking at the total transaction or protecting the end user experience, you're obviously moving beyond really what could be the primary silo of the developer. Now, back to your point, Diego, if you look at more distributed architectures like microservices or potentially cloud native apps and microservices, perhaps the isolation of the quality activity can be isolated to that asynchronous component of the transaction. Yet, what we find today is, applications are still fairly complex. So this idea of keeping the testing sequence in line with the expected development delivery is really the first step I think we should be focusing on when it comes to AI, meaning that using AI and everything that comes under the umbrella of it in terms of optimization to close the sequencing gap between when code is altered to the point when we feel like a risk candidate has an acceptable level of risk for release. So that's the biggest gap I see today, and probably the biggest opportunity. The reason why I wanted to jump on there is that you said, Diego, this process cadence mismatch, and I think it's really misunderstood as we look at a broad release structure, right? I think it's one of those elements that we assume is going to catch up, but there's really not a ton of activity happening to close that gap today.
Wayne, thanks. Sunil, what are your thoughts about this?
And every yeah, so a couple of things. Going back to the original point about digital and the challenges, I think there are a couple of areas why AI definitely seems to be a very good fit. One is digital really equates to speed, but it is speed with quality, right? So when you kind of try to look at quality, historically we've tried to kind of get quality by putting in a lot more resources, a lot more infrastructure, maybe sacrifice on speed and then get quality, right? Digital, those have become table stakes for digital, so you cannot really do that. So how do you get high quality with high speed? That really again goes back to a lot of automation, as Diego mentioned. So you have automation, a lot of automation, and you have high speed. Now, in order for all of this to work like a well-oiled machine, you need a lot of data analysis that's happening on the back end and optimizations that's being done for you without you having to kind of manually do the intervention. And that is why AI becomes a very big play for digital, right? So that one challenge of digital, which really leans itself well to AI-based solution. The second aspect, I think, is also around the fact that digital really now equates to a lot of different kind of interfaces, right? So you have voice, which is pretty ubiquitous. You have touch interfaces. You may look at interfaces which really just could be based on environmental changes, etc. How do you test these, right? And how do you testing a simple NLP, a natural language processing engine, is not trivial. You need to use some kind of an intelligent engine to do that, and that is why these digital challenges again can lead itself well to AI-based solutions.
And so this is good. Diego, you've been publishing a lot in this whole field. And I think it'd be really interesting with some use cases, some examples where people have applied AI, because there's always this question of, okay, it's good in theory, but practically speaking, how can it help me with my problems today? Because I have a budget today, I have a set of deliveries. How are you going to help me make that easier and cheaper?
Well, unfortunately, I must say, I know that this is all about AI and testing. The business, the business cases of AI are although I do consider development and testing an important business case itself, right, is not where AI is being adopted. Where AI is mostly being adopted, of course, from clients is they're trying to use AI to improve their own operations. Actually, that's the top use case. Their operations, meaning their business operations, right? So you've got companies that are improving business processes, and they're improving customer engagement. They're augmenting their call center folks, which instead of dealing with 5-10 clients a day with an AI system supporting them, giving them more information about their clients, can support 20 or 30 or 40, so becoming more performing rather than talking about cost cutting. And so, and most of that 55% of active clients around adopting AI is more about building, chatbots, building voice, introducing voice. It's about business applications. It's early days, even for using AI in the software development lifecycle itself. Probably one of the areas, that heat map, one of the research was a heat map that I did about a year ago on asking how will AI improve the software development lifecycle. It's true that the red hot area of the heat map was testing. So in other words, people thought, analyzing technical code. Some of those examples you just already heard, automate test case generation, suggest test strategy, identifying bugs and focus testing on areas, most likely, where there are a higher potential for defects, recognize images, user interface, voice, predict outcomes, increase test coverage, and so forth. So testing was like, this is the area we plan. A year ago, people said, this is the area we plan on using AI. But most of that is a population of vendors, system integrators, people who have, some more technical background in these areas than end user clients themselves. But across the life cycle, the heat map said that the next important area would have been, would be also the higher end of the life cycle, ideation, planning, requirements, finding, test cases that might be repetitive. And also the end of the life cycle. Somebody mentioned DevOps a minute ago, but think about all the automation at the release level, all the automation, improving the automation of predictive maintenance, increasing, CIOs are asking the question, well, it's great to know that my ATM is not working, but I would like to know that before it's actually happening, just as, companies do for their airplane engines, right? And so, so it's starting to be utilized as well in the business process of IT, let's call it, more generally speaking, and for testing. But I think it's, I'm getting less inquiries directly from clients, which are at the stage of learning what AI is and what it can do for them. It's one, first step is for clients to understand and users to understand, well, what can I do differently with this technology? And in testing, it's the same. Part of it is going to come through vendors that sell software that is fueled with AI. Part of it is going to come through the partners that they work with, who come with experience in the space of AI. So it's tools, it's services, and part of it is going to come, I would say, by the pressure that they have on their digital strategy, or how fast they need to move with quality. I totally agree. I've been writing about quality at speed for quite a number of years now, and probably AI can improve that. And part of it is also going to come on how much is our enterprises using and building AI systems themselves, because at some point we need to, as testers, we need to have a seat at the table to find out how those systems are really being tested.
Sunil, one of the things that's interesting is a little bit of a case here of physician heal thyself. You guys are in IT, AI is wonderful. How can you apply it? Give us some examples. So from your experience, what are some quantifiable things that people have done in terms of, dealing with backlogs, dealing with optimization, other ways they've applied AI in practice to make a difference for, IT operations?
Sure. So we've seen a couple of areas where definitely AI has been able to provide value today. I think Avery, as you asked. So one is, of course, if you look at the entire testing cycle, there is the elephant in the room. Typically, is that I'm going to have these a million test cases that I need to kind of deal with, right? Probably no one's asking the question. Is there a way to kind of make that down to 500,000, right? So that is an area where we've seen kind of AI help, and in some of the services engagement that we do, where we try to kind of look at these test cases and try to figure out what can we do to optimize these test cases and kind of whittle it down to a much manageable number, which means remove redundancies, duplicates, and componentization and bunch. And AI is very deeply used in kind of solving this problem by really looking at test cases and trying to figure out semantic meaning between them and figure out efficiency, figure out duplications essentially. And those have really given quantifiable outcomes in terms of reduced number of test cases to have to deal with, which really impact all your downstream processes down the line. So those are clear ROI numbers that we can actually quantify, because the amount of the resources you spend, the infrastructure spend that you have, etc., are kind of proportionally reduced. The other area where we also have seen quantifiable outcomes come out is really as part of the testing cycles itself. So testing the QA infrastructure is a gold mine for data, right? It is being there doesn't mean it's easy to harness it, but it's a gold mine nevertheless, right? So what we've seen and is basically to kind of use this gold mine of data, of defects, etc., and try to apply machine learning models to it to really predict what kind of defects could emerge in your products going down the line, and hence what kind of resource allocation should you do, what kind of resource infrastructure do you need, and not only that, but also do some more prescription and basically say that, hey, out of these 100,000 test cases, that test automation scripts that will get run every night, now because of what the tool predicts, you just need to run probably 25,000 test scripts, right? So that is again a great quantifiable outcome that we've seen, which gives them value today, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it is a gold mine of data that's available. I mean, there's a process to get to it, but there is a clear path to getting a quantifiable outcome, in incremental stages. So I think those are two main areas where we see outcomes.
Well, it's interesting because you really kind of picked up on Wayne's point about data exhaust and being able to use that data exhaust in a smart way. And the other thing I kind of took away was it's not AI for the sake of AI, but AI for very focused results. And in particular, results around both increase, as people mentioned, quality at speed. Now, one thing I'd ask everyone that's got questions, you can enter them and we can start to weave some of those in. If you've got questions, please post them. And Wayne, I wanted to kind of pick up on your whole notion of quality at speed and how you can use automation for DevOps and the like, and your thoughts about kind of the key obstacles and how you can use some of that data exhaust to improve testing.
So, gosh, there's so much that comes to mind when you ask me that question. But I think what we need to do is focus, right? And have an outcome that we need to solve and prioritize our approach to that problem, whether we're using any subsegment of the AI paradigm or thought, okay? So for example, let me look at maybe two or three items here. So first of all, today our test cases are bloated. They need to go on a massive diet. If you look at what we have a lot of duplication. We have a significant number of false positives. And all that is sucking time away from what is required from us in terms of not only the cadence of how we execute tests, but also when we need to get those answers to the right people at the right time. Let me just pause 1 second and just emphasize one piece here. Not only do we need to look at these types of technologies to assist us to do things better, but we need to go back and ask the question, at what point in the process can we actually distribute information in which it is actionable? And the time horizon that we've traditionally looked at for a test has been somewhat broad, so we'll just run everything. What we need to do is deliver the right information just in time to the right person so they can actually make an adjustment to something that has a real definitive impact to the quality of that release candidate. So the first thing I would be looking at today is this idea of potentially automated test design, where we're actually using business-related rules to really avoid repetitive or cost-effective or even manual cleanups that we're doing that is wasting a lot of time. The second piece, very, very tightly correlated to the automated test design component, would be risk coverage. Diego mentioned business risk coverage. Today, I've run a couple surveys on this idea of risk and business risk. Today, there's a huge disconnect between what your CIO would consider a business risk and what your tester or developer considers a business risk. You could just understanding the pure nature of the activities of these two people, the CIO versus the hands-on contributor. The idea or the concept of business risk is a massive disconnect today. And what can we do to potentially optimize test sets so we can maximize business risk coverage and, given time resources, execute what is required for the time horizon of the release that we're in, okay? And we can do that with machine learning. We can do that with pattern matching today. And I think that is another massive priority for us in terms of optimizing this whole cycle. I'm going to make one more point and then we hand it back to you, Avery, which is undeniably, digital transformation and enterprise DevOps has altered the roles, responsibilities of the tester. But we haven't caught up yet. We're still at this delta zone in which testing is catching up. I want to add just one thing. AI and machine learning is not going to be the pure magic that is going to fill that gap. It's going to have to be highly focused on very specific components that are painful to that organization. And whatever pains an organization is going to be pretty much honed into that particular organization itself. So you need to prioritize in terms of what you're going to attack. Now, across the board, what I see when I'm out there with clients is this automated test design, in which you can actually reduce the bloat of your test suite, number one. And then number two, optimizing what you're actually going to execute for optimal risk coverage would be the second thing I would focus on.
Yes, I think that those are really good points. That it's things we've seen where you can use the AI to improve your efficiency and still maintain the same level of risk coverage. And then also in other cases, be smarter about how you refactor test cases to make them more maintainable as well. So there are a number of different aspects. One question that got asked was, are any people currently using AI for testing? Well, yes, I think a couple of us are on the call here. And the challenge is how to broaden that so it's not just impacting one area. And in some cases, the AI may not be as visible. It'll be embedded into processes, not broken out and with a big banner on it saying AI, just you'll see better results. And still, I mean, one of the things that people, I think, question, and where I was taking this question that came in is, how do people assess if they're AI ready? And, what does it mean to be AI ready? Is there anything special someone needs to do, and what prerequisites? I mean, is it important that you already have automation? What about your past repositories of test results? What other things do people need to be thinking about and doing?
Sure. Are we ready for the invasion of the robot? Right. That's a larger question. So it's a great question. And I think AI ready is something we talk about a lot at InfoStretch. And the reason is because one of the basic premise of AI is you need to have good data, right? And if you ask any data scientist out there today, they will tell you that they spend more than 70 to 80% of the time actually getting a data to a point can actually use. So that's really the reality, not in test automation alone, in any kind of an AI project essentially. So data is very important, and what that means is that your systems need to be, of course, be automated, right? So if you have a lot of manual processes in place, and you really say that, okay, now I'm going to make my thing AI next week, it's not going to happen, right? So you have to basically take it from where you are, build in the right automation processes, because as I mentioned earlier, you need to have speed with quality. So you need to put in the right automation. That's how the data that you really need for AI will really come into play, right? you get your automation processes in place, and you need to have your data in a way that is kind of, is at least amenable to an AI solution. What that means really is that you could have a lot of different data coming from a lot of different sources, but AI needs to be able to kind of correlate the data in some form. So how you set up your automation strategy, and what kind of a foresight do you put in place to kind of make that happen is very important, right? So as a best practice, we always say that, okay, if you have great automation, if you're really mature and you're ready for AI, still start with a small pilot project. There's always a trailblazer in your organization which wants to start with AI and start playing with it. Start with those smaller projects, get them kind of, get them tuned to kind of get AI ready and see the benefits coming out of it, and then kind of pan out, right? You don't do a whole a kind of full revamp of your existing infrastructure. So those are some of the best practices I think we need to make in place. So going back to your original question, AI ready really means that, does it have the data that AI would need? Are your systems automated enough that you can really leverage AI, right? Because otherwise the bottlenecks are going to be a manual processes. And one other thing I also like to point out always is that if you try to build AI solutions on your own, most of the time you will actually hit into a skill bottleneck, which means that in AI readiness for you could also mean that you have the skills for doing that, right? But it is not always a recommended solution. But if something is, an organization could use, other companies provide these services or tools to really make it happen. But skills sometimes also become an AI readiness issue if you're going to do an homegrown solution.
So one of the things I'm taking away, and I'd love to get the other speakers' thoughts on that in a second, is that being AI ready is in many ways the same prerequisites you'd have to be ready for DevOps, to be ready for in-sprint automation and agile. So is that true that if you're doing the right things to get ready for DevOps and agile, you're doing the right things to get ready for AI?
Well, I think some of them, which is the most important thing, is change, right? I mean, what's common to all of that is cultural change, and that's the biggest challenge. Because the rest, I mean, yes, you can learn the technicalities behind AI. You don't need to be just a data scientist. That's why we talk about AI engineers in Forrester as well. Even my daughter, she's doing a thesis for her master thesis, and she's using now TensorFlow. And she doesn't have a strong, she doesn't have an AI background. She studied a few things, and here she is already building something interesting with a machine learning algorithm. So, and actually, I've interviewed lots of startups where they just grab an AI software developer. A software developer. He 6 months time with good training and using algorithms and getting his hands dirty, he'll learn how to master some of these technologies. There are tools with APIs, Google, IBM, etc. They all are providing platforms. So that's the technicalities is always not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is really the cultural change, at least for Agile and DevOps. But AI is also going to be a big cultural shift because we talk about having the robot in your. How do you collaborate with the robot in your cubicle, which is something that people start predict happening. And this robot might be a software robot, not necessarily a physical one. But I just wanted to summarize, take a step back and summarize the use cases that I've kind of formalized in my research recently, which is, again, it is a new thing, and therefore we're starting to see the pickup. But what is the potential? The potential is huge, in my opinion. It's a great opportunity. I totally agree. But the categories in testing that I formalized is test case design generation. We talked about that. I think that's one of the biggest and most important because it kind of will make a testing smarter. It will reduce the tests that need automated and optimized also to better coverage. Script code generation is another area that AI will help with. Well, it's machine learning, let's say. Unit test generation. We're actually going to start seeing Microsoft has already released a unit test generator. So developers can write code and unit tests will get generated with that code that is written. That halves the time that it takes to build code for developers. Image object recognition, of course, is another area that I see, as a use case. Recognition of image, video, there's more of that going on, of course, with new apps. There is defects management or, predictive clustering of defects, smart way of collecting of clustering defects and dealing with them in the same way. The impact of change, correlating what type of change, what it will require from a testing perspective, outcome analysis. This is the biggest area, actually. Machine learning, data, outcome analysis is we've got lots of data, coming from running testing, from during the software development lifecycle, DevOps. It's all these tools are generating data, and using that data to kind of have insights to improve the way we build the software, we test the software is a big, but also is a big opportunity, including of course the quality of software itself. Test assessment optimization, and the last one I'd like to talk about is very briefly is test data variation. We need to use lots of data in testing, right? And it can become even a big data problem, especially when we go into the IoT world and some of these users. So these are like 7 or 8 use cases where AI can improve the way we test. But for me, I'd like to be provocative here. It's the guys around, like the services, you guys, tool vendors that also have to make use of AI in the technologies that you're building, in the services that you're delivering to clients, to kind of help make this happen.
Yeah, so you talked about, I think, about different categories. I think then there's also, and also alluded to the fact that there's room for AI to up front to change how you do the test case generation, and then during performance of tests to optimize which tests get run and perhaps not, optimize around risk levels. And then ultimately, and one we've seen also is the outcome analysis, or as one customer said to me, the answer is somewhere in there, meaning I get all of these test results filling my email box, but I don't know which ones actually matter in that huge list of automated results. So Wayne, you're dealing with all of this also, and you've dealt with change as people are trying to evolve their test strategies. What advice do you have for people as they start to look at how to get their organizations to adopt this, and where you've seen applications that really make sense to try some of these new technologies?
So let me be pragmatic and just say, as technologists, we are the worst when it comes to really understanding culture and change. We feel if it's a tool or code, we can master it, we can do it. And this has been our downfall in terms of really improving or incrementally improving process. So I'm with you, guys. I believe that having a partner in this journey is required, because you don't know what you don't know, and that's what's going to actually seize the project, right, or stop the project. And I can't emphasize it more, that if you look around your entire organization, most of your organization or other supporting processes are going to have assistance in terms of process redefinition or refinement. And they're going to take a very strict approach to technology enablement. We, as technologists, tend to skip that because, we could write it. We could do it ourselves, right? It's easy. It's that simple. And it can't be overlooked. So I can't emphasize the cultural element of this enough. And by the way, I'm really encouraged on the priority that enterprise DevOps has put on culture and changes that and the very productive changes that we've seen. So it's a step in the right direction. That's number one. To the second part of your question, in terms of really where to go next, I'm kind of split on two things. First of all, the definition of AI, or what we consider AI, is a huge umbrella term for really a lot of advanced automation. And like I said in the beginning of our conference call today, was that no matter what, it's moving the needle. The idea of what can happen is moving the needle in a very, very positive direction. However, what I would encourage, in particular, testing teams to do is look at the biggest pain, right, and start to dissect what that individual, what the barriers are that are building into that pain. So is it time? Is the test suite too bloated? Are you able to get at the correct test environment anytime, anywhere, for example? Or is test data your major problem? And then look at an organization that's going to assist you to bridge that gap or series of gaps in order to meet the expectation in terms of time, or the cadence of test in terms of time. And by the way, what you're going to find is that there's not one answer for any of these things, but it is basically what is the priority of the organization and solve that problem. The biggest mistake I see today, first is cultural, but the second mistake I see today is really an over-exuberance of the fact that the black box is going to take care of the problem, and it's not. It does require process. That process requires data, and that data requires, if you're talking in the AI world, a lot of it in order for you to get to the optimized answers. So start at the problem and define the problem. Don't just throw the technology at it right now.
It's an easy advice to forget, which is you got to start from the problem and solve back to the technology, not get AI as the hammer and run around looking for a nail. So
well, it seems to be the exuberance today, right?
Well, it's true for everything, right? People weren't exuberant, get them excited. So Sunil, one of the interesting. Go ahead, Diego.
I was just going to say, we use that hammer and nail quite often and very much. But I must say, and again, I want to be provocative here, is that actually with AI that works.
Just go find the right. Well, if you find the right problem, it's got a pretty broad application. That's the key.
It's understanding.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Now, I would just say it's understanding what you can actually do and the potential it has, right? Because the big confusion is, why can't I just do this with what I have, right? What's different? What can I do differently with it? If you don't understand the potential of it as an organization, it's going to be really hard to even, endorse it. But that's an organization that wants to kind of get into the forefront. On the other hand, some cases it's like, you know what? I have a partner. I want my partner to do, this is what I want. Go ahead and do it. Whether you're using AI, Agile, DevOps, I don't care. I just want to look at the outcome. There's some organizations that also, kind of think that way.
So, what are some, examples of, one of the questions that came in was, some examples of, some optimizations. We've talked about reducing the number of tests, but what are some other ways you could apply AI to achieve a business outcomes? So this isn't about, AI per se, but what are some of the business impacts you could have at different stages in the cycle that you've seen successfully delivered?
Sure. So if I start off just from a testing process, we touched upon some of them earlier, which is optimizing your test cases, componentization, etc. So the real business value in doing that essentially is basically you're trying to get speed and agility so as to meet your real demands of the customer, and by applying technologies like either model-based testing combined with combinatorial analysis of data, what you're able to do is that you're able to get right quality of testing done with the minimum amount of resources and time spent on it, right? So that's definitely a direct business value that you can really get out of it. The other area that you can really get business value out of it is, so when you go digital, as I mentioned earlier, you're looking at newer set of interfaces, right? So you're looking at voice, you're looking at NLP-based engine which is powering your interfaces, etc. You need to be able to test it in a way that it really kind of takes your new customer base into account, right? You kind of hitting new demographics for these kind of solutions. And to be able to test these effectively, it's a case of AI testing AI now, right? So to get the right business outcome in those cases, can my product reach out to this whole new geography that I was aiming to reach in a very short period of time with my existing product? What is the delta that I need to build and test? AI can come into play to really test those effectively in a very optimum manner, so that your go-to-market in these new geographies can be much faster than it was before, especially if you're looking at newer interfaces like voice bots and chatbots, because you need more intelligence to test them than typical test scripts that you could run and automate for testing those, right? So those are a couple of areas that we definitely see business outcomes in. And the third area, of course, is that everything that we talk about really needs a lot of infrastructure to run and execute. And of course, with moving to the cloud, you're talking about on-demand infrastructure to be able to kind of spend them on demand, etc. They're not cheap and they're not free for sure, right? So you need to be able to apply AI to make sure that your spend on getting the agility, right, with the kind of output that you need is kind of tempered with the right optimization tools for infrastructure provisioning, so that your business outcome that you would have got otherwise is not kind of discounted by the extra spend you're doing on infrastructure. So I would say these are some areas that definitely are very impactful from a business perspective.
Wayne, any parting advice for people as they're thinking about how to use AI and how that might work with kind of low code, no code kind of environments, and what other thoughts you'd want people to have as they're thinking about this?
So I always go back to one major theme, which is have your expectations prioritize your expectations in terms of what you want to achieve, and knock out the problem incrementally. Don't try to solve it all, because what we face today is somewhat overwhelming in terms of all the barriers associated with software test automation, and it's not going to just solve itself in a very easy, simple, clean manner. Focus on it, focus on the process improvements around it, and then apply the technology as needed to improve that. And I know this just sounds so basic, and I even catch myself saying it sometimes, saying, wow, this is the same words of wisdom that we've applied for years, but I think it does make sense in terms of balancing the expectations associated with AI in the software development lifecycle these days.
And Diego, any as you look at this, any parting words of wisdom for people?
Yeah, I think that there's the pragmatic side of AI, and there's the, as I said, the pure and the general AI, scary AI that people make us think is behind the corner. I think it's nowhere close. But there's pragmatic stuff that pragmatic AI can help us do pragmatic things, and whether it's machine learning or deep learning, whatever technology, I think it's definitely a new tool to add into the basket that we have and technologies that we have to build better software faster. Don't be. I think minimum investment, starting small, is important. Having someone at starting to play and understand the technologies, and then match that to your biggest pain, right? And start seeing if we can really solve one of those big pains that today you haven't really been able to improve with traditional testing. And again, you're not alone in doing that. Leverage all the internal and external skills that you might need. Don't be skeptical with it. Don't think that AI is just for improving business operations, which it is. Of course, you'll be doing that. But I think also improving the key business process of building software and testing software. I think it's a great technology that's going to help us there. It still needs improvement, still needs to mature. We're at the beginning. I want to be very pragmatic about it and realistic about it. And so it's just ahead of us.
Well, look, I think everyone is speakers. Certainly, I'll speak for InfoStretch. We'd be glad to continue this conversation with anyone that's interested individually. And with that, let me hand it back for our wrap up. And thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. That will end our event for today in that case. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Be sure to check out and subscribe to this DTV channel. The link is right there. You'll also be redirected to it as soon as we're done here. So please check that out and subscribe. And I would like to thank all the speakers who participated today, Avery for moderating, and InfoStretch for sponsoring this web seminar, and of course, all of you in the audience who spent this last hour with us. So everybody have a good day, and we hope to see you at a future event.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.